everyone. My name is Louis, one of the founders of Active and Thriving, and welcome to Wellbeing Live, where we speak to an expert in a different field of wellbeing every month and bring you some interesting thoughts about what's happening in the space. Typically, your host is Josh Marsden, who's at the Wellbeing at Work conference in Sydney today, presenting on Active and Thriving and the great things that we've been doing. Joining me for this 15 minutes today is Mark. So thank you, Mark, for joining us. So today we're really going to be focusing on the foundations of financial wellbeing. Very interesting topic that's got a lot of traction, particularly in the last 12 months. Mark is the founder of Hey Coach, which is a financial wellness app that combines AI and human financial expertise to help people improve their financial position. Before founding Hey Coach, Mark was an executive at Computershare, where he developed and commercialised e-commerce solutions for banks and super funds. Mark has an MBA from Melbourne Business School and a Diploma of Financial Planning. Thank you for joining us, Mark.
Awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.
So we've only got a couple of minutes to go through today, 15 minutes. We'd like to keep it short and sweet. So we're going to jump straight into the questions, Mark. Why don't we start with the big one? What is financial wellbeing? What does it mean to you? And how do you know when you are financially healthy?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think, it sounds like a little bit of a fluffy term when it comes to finances, but what it really means is that you know that you have enough money for your current and your future financial needs. And so it's really independent of your income. It's really about how you're feeling about your finances. So are you anxious about your current situation and meeting your obligations, or are you anxious about the future? And that might mean, your retirement, but it could also mean, anxious about being able to get into the property market, or anxious about upcoming school fees, or whatever it might be. So it doesn't really matter where you're at. Part of it is, are you feeling anxious, or are you feeling confident about where you're at? And then the second part is the hard numbers. So, how is your cash flow? What is your financial position? How much coverage do you have for your obligations? What will happen if you lost your job? And what situation will you find yourself in? So, you might be an optimist and you might be feeling good, but maybe the numbers say a different story. So it's good to know your numbers and know exactly where you sit. But the other one is, even if you are on paper looking well, it's good to examine why you might be feeling anxious about the future, or where you are right now. So that's really what wellbeing's about, and finances, how you feel, but then the hard numbers as well.
Yeah, great. And so we often use the analogy in wellbeing about putting deposits in the bank for the future in terms of our physical health, our mental health, saving up for when we get to that bit of a challenge, that rainy day fund, and even more important from a financial point of view. But I guess everybody's experience can be quite different. And just like physical health and mental health, that, what's good for me might not necessarily be the same for you. So it is quite individualistic, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, as I say, it's, people often think that income is the most important factor here, but, trust me, we're all living to the maximum that our finances will allow, and the maximum of our lifestyle that we can get for where we're at. And so often we commit ourselves fully on our finances, and sometimes we're overcommitted. So even if you are earning, $200,000 a year, you might find that your mortgage and your lifestyle commitments and the expectations of your community and family mean that you are feeling, struggling to sleep at night, and earning another 50,000 on top of that won't necessarily fix where you're at. It's a lot of it is around the way that we're behaving and the expectations and commitments that we have, no matter where you are and your career and in life.
Let's just dig into some of those terms that you touched on there. So what does cash flow mean? Can you expand on that a little bit? And also around financial position, what does that mean for maybe somebody who doesn't know too much about it?
Yeah, I think they're good questions. So just to excuse us for the next sort of few minutes, we're going to get into a few technical, financial terms, but these are important to start to break down and have a better understanding of where you are at, and what it means is if you get into something like Hey Coach, which is running the numbers on your behalf, you'll start to have a better understanding of what the numbers are telling you. So simply, like, cash flow in a business context is really about how much money's coming in and out, your revenues and your expenses. And so for personal finances, it's very similar. It's what income's coming in and what expenses are going out and what's left in your back pocket when all's said and done each fortnight or each month after your pay packet's done. And so part of that is obviously just wanting to have have money left over each month, but importantly as well is understanding whether you've got money there for an emergency. And so one, you want to have a positive cash flow, so less money going out than in, but also that money is accumulating into an emergency fund so that at one level, if your washing machine breaks down, you can replace it, or your fridge. If your car breaks down, you can get a new one or replace it. If you lose your job, you can cover your mortgage repayments, whatever it might be. So it's that short-term emergency funding, and a lot of that it's driven by the health of your cash flow. So it's about making sure you're not accumulating debt month on month to cover emergencies. And so that's a really important, I guess, day-to-day thought around how your money's going. And the next one, equally important, is your financial position. And these three concepts to that is your net wealth or your net worth, your assets and borrowings. And so this is looking not just on immediate, risks and opportunities, but also it's looking at your future as well. So your net worth is simply how much you have in assets, and then taking off what you have in borrowings, and then seeing what's left in the bank or left in your back pocket. If you sold up everything today, and what cash would you have on hand? And it's helpful when you're thinking about that, when you're looking at the first bucket, which is assets, start to understand, what type of assets you have. And one way to think of that is, what liquid assets do you have? So these are assets that if you needed money tomorrow or within a few days, how much money could you get your hands on? So typically that's your savings in the bank and any investments that you have. So things like shares, which can quickly be sold and then turned into cash. So and then the other one are more illiquid assets. So these will be things like your car, which might take you a few weeks to a few months to sell. Your house. So if you really got desperate, could you sell your home, and how long would that take to turn that into cash? And so what often happens is you might be someone who is they call it asset rich and cash poor, and that might mean that all of your money is tied up in illiquid assets. And if something happened and it was a shock to the system, like you lost your job or interest rates rose or there was a margin call on your investments, something happens and you need immediate access to cash, you're not able to get that money. And then when that happens, you start to look at the situation, your obligations and your borrowings, and you might find that unable to get money quickly, you miss a house repayment or a car repayment on your loan. And then suddenly your borrowings become really important because you stand to lose the assets that you've worked hard to have and pay off. They could be reclaimed by the bank or something like that because you don't have sufficient liquidity, or you don't have the ability to get money on hand when you need it. So it's helpful when you're thinking of your assets. If I needed the money quickly, could I sell that asset and get those funds? Often that's not possible when you're tied up in homes and cars and things like that. So it's about understanding how much do I have in liquid assets, how much do I have in illiquid assets, and then you look at your borrowings and go, so how many of my borrowings are secured by assets, so that if I miss my repayments on those borrowings, I stand to lose those assets as well. And then how many are in unsecured borrowings? So these are like credit cards, buy now, pay later. So if you missed payments there, you might get impacted on your credit rating. You might encounter fees, but you won't lose your home and you won't lose your car. So when you're thinking about your financial position, where are my assets sitting? Have I got liquid and illiquid assets, and what proportion? And also my borrowings, like how many of them are secured against an asset where if something happened, I didn't make that repayment, I stand to lose it. So that's a really good way of just looking at your finances, your cash flow, but then also looking at your position. And it's super important to know where all those assets and the borrowings sit, because you can find sometimes that you're sitting there with a lot of borrowing and obligations, but very little coverage to repay them if you needed money quickly if something had happened. So that's a very high level way to break down your position in the buckets.
And then I can only guess that the trends and the change over time is what you want to be thinking about as well. So whether that's progressively getting into a better picture or a worse picture, and that kind of really is going to dictate how you act. My washing machine has recently broken, so I'm going to check if we have an emergency fund.
Yes.
Jumping into the next question, financial tips.
Yeah, so I think just for, everyone's going to be in a very different financial situation, and this is not meant to be personal advice, but there's a few stages in life that we go through, and there's, just at the, top of mind for this webinar, it's good to think firstly about security and financial security. And this is about building an emergency savings fund for what we've been talking about for unexpected situations, whether that be loss of income, movement in interest rates, whatever it may be, fridge or washing machine broken. So with that, the first goal, 50% of Australians have less than $1,000 in savings and are not in a position to deal with an emergency outside of using a credit card or getting a personal loan, using buy now, pay later, whatever it might be, to cover the fact that there's no savings in the bank for that particular unexpected event. So for a lot of people, getting to $1,000 in savings and having that in a separate savings account is a great first step, and it puts you ahead of 50% of other Australians who are not able to accumulate $1,000 to cover short-term emergencies. Once you've achieved that, the number that's recommended, and again, look at your own situation, but if you got 2 to 3 times your monthly income sitting there in an emergency savings fund, and sort of out of sight and out of mind, so it's not getting caught up in your transactions, that's a great first step for anyone to achieve. And it puts you probably, in a really strong position for the next big part of our financial lives, which is the decision to go into home ownership. And, as employees, there's very, very few, I guess, tax advantages that's available to PAYG employees. And one of the biggest advantages for middle-class families and for people earning a wage is to get into home ownership. And the reason being is that, the policy settings are all around trying to have as many people owning their home as possible. And so it's one of the only areas that you can get capital gains free return on an asset. And also you can use your stable income as a way to service and to leverage into a particular asset class. So there's simply put, the deck is stacked towards home ownership in Australia, and it's a great, I guess, asset aspiration to try and go for. And so for a lot of people, if you've achieved those emergency savings fund goal, then that gives you in a really great position to look at a deposit goal and to look to get to the housing market. And, it's a real pivot point for, when you get into a relationship or when you're looking at families and you're looking for security through to retirement. Home ownership is one of those big things. If you've had the discipline to get an emergency savings fund together, then you've built those muscles, I guess, that are going to get you towards a deposit. And whether it takes 5, 10 or 20 years towards that deposit, it's a really important milestone in most people's lives, and something that will take you through, as I said, to retirement. And that's probably the last point is, once you're in that home ownership mode, it's then looking to what's next, and it's really looking towards where you'll be in retirement. And it's always seems a long way off. And even if you're 55 or 60 and you're looking at 10 to 5 years before you consider in retirement, it's still always going to feel like a long way off. But it's at that point you can start to think about other areas of your finances, so the accumulation of super, other investment options, and also how close to, or are you going to have your house fully paid off at the point where you cease having an income. And so the next one is really looking to that next stage, that 65 years of age, and then understanding, will the house be paid off? Will I have other assets? What will my super balance be? And therefore, what sort of retirement or what sort of lifestyle can I expect in retirement? And so are kind of three areas that everyone will go through and have to think about at some point. And it's really about, working the muscles on the emergency savings fund, seeing what the runway is going to be to look towards home ownership. And then, because as I said, there's so many tax advantages to that. And then where position will you be in when you cease to have an income around that 65 years of age? And once you've got a feel for the three of those, then you can start to make more tactical planning in between.
Thanks, Mark. That's excellent. So we've been using Hey Coach inside Active and Thriving for a few months now, and we're also launching it as a free service for all of the customers in Active and Thriving. I can't speak more highly of the platform. It takes a lot of the things that you're talking about and really automates that and gives you the advice that you need. If anybody's interested to dig dive a bit more into Hey Coach and Active and Thriving and see how this can support their workplace, please get in touch with us via our website, and we're happy to go through the platform and show you how it can support your employees to make better financial decisions. Thanks everybody for joining. It's quick and it is good value. We'll have the recording up on the website if you want to share it within your workplace. Thanks again, Mark, for joining us on Wellbeing Live.
Thank you.